I've always believed that a man's true measure isn't written on a paycheck carved into a trophy or displayed on the side of a big house. It's written in how he treats the ones who can't defend themselves. That's something I learned long ago, and it's probably why my dog Buddy became the most important part of my daily life after my wife passed. He's been my shadow, my comfort, and at times my only real reason to keep getting up in the morning. Buddy is a 9-year-old black lab with graying fur around his muzzle, but to me, he's still that excitable puppy Emily and I brought home when she was just a little girl. Back then, he was so clumsy he'd trip over his own paws. Now he's calmer, wiser, but just as loyal. Our routine is simple. Every morning, I pour a cup of black coffee into a chipped Denver Broncos mug clip the leash onto Buddy's collar and head down to the river trail. He knows every bend, every smell, every spot where rabbits dart across. I talk to him like a person because in many ways, he's been better company than most people I know. Life settled into that rhythm after Martha died. My daughter Emily visits often, and she's the only one who can break that routine without complaint from me. When she asked me to let her fiance Tyler stay at the house while I drove up to Cheyenne for the weekend, I hesitated. Something about the man never sat right with me. He was all flash expensive sneakers cologne that lingered too long, and stories about investments that never quite made sense when you asked questions. But Emily looked at me with those pleading eyes, the same ones she used when she was 7 years old, and begged to keep Buddy. "Dad, it'll just be easier if he's here when I get off work. Please," she said. I didn't want to cause a rift. She's my only child, and after her mother's death, we leaned on each other in ways that went beyond father and daughter. If Tyler made her happy, I was willing to try. I told myself it's only 2 nights. Tyler arrived Friday morning. He dragged a sleek overnight bag across my hardwood floor, glanced at Buddy, and frowned. "Dog hair's gonna get on my jacket," he muttered, brushing at his sleeve like the fur was some sort of poison. I laughed it off, but Buddy noticed. His tail didn't wag like it usually did when new people came around. He just stared. I gave Tyler the rundown. Coffee's in the cabinet, thermostat sticks. Sometimes Buddy likes a walk before dark. He nodded, scrolling on his phone while I spoke. I told myself maybe it was just a generational thing. I'm 58, he's 29. Maybe that's how young men are now. When I loaded up my old Ford and pulled out of the driveway, Buddy sat at the window. His head, tilted ears, perked eyes locked on mine. I felt the usual pang of guilt leaving him, but I kissed Emily's forehead and told myself it was fine. He was in his own house. He'd be safe. The weekend was uneventful. A few beers with my old friend Mike in Cheyenne, talk about the Broncos season and memories of the old days when we climbed poles in snowstorms to keep power running. I missed Buddy more than I missed my bed. On Sunday afternoon, I turned south toward Fort Collins, eager to see that familiar wagging tail waiting at the door. Only that's not what I found. When I stepped into the house, the air felt heavy. Buddy didn't bound toward me like he always did. Instead, he limped into the hallway, slow and cautious, head low, tail still. His eyes flicked to me and then away, as if ashamed. My heart dropped into my stomach. I crouched down, whispering, "Hey, boy, what's wrong?" He shuffled closer, but not with his usual joy. His gait was stiff, and when I reached out, he flinched slightly. That flinch stabbed deeper than any knife could. Tyler strolled in from the kitchen, sipping something from a tall glass. "Oh, he's fine," he said casually. "Probably just old age catching up. Labs get creaky, right?" I looked at Buddy again. His left ear had a faint cut, a red line against the black fur. My hand traced along his ribs, and I felt tenderness there, the way his muscles tensed when I pressed lightly. Old age doesn't cause cuts. Old age doesn't make a dog flinch at his owner's hand. I wanted to explode right there. My throat burned with words I couldn't speak. My fists clenched until the knuckles whitened, but something told me to wait, to watch, to listen. Yeah, I forced out, maybe. Buddy leaned against my leg as if begging me not to leave him again. I scratched behind his ear, whispering softly. His eyes softened just a fraction. That's when I made a silent vow. If something had happened, and deep down I knew it had, I would find out. That night, I barely slept. Every sound of Buddy shifting in his bed made me sit up. I noticed the way he lowered himself slowly, gingerly, like each movement hurt. I noticed how he startled at the sound of Tyler dropping a fork into the sink. Most of all, I noticed the way Tyler looked at him with annoyance, not affection. I told myself to be patient. Anger without proof is just noise, but anger with proof that can change everything. The first crack in Tyler's story appeared when I took Buddy for a short walk on Monday morning. As we passed the garage, I spotted faint scuff marks along the lower wall about knee height, and something broken in the trash bin, a broom handle splintered near the end. I stared at it until my hands trembled. Old age didn't cause that either. I bent down, clipped the leash onto Buddy's collar, and whispered, "I promise, boy, we'll get through this. I'll make it right." And in that moment, the story of how I'd been betrayed began. I didn't know then exactly how far it would go, how much patience, planning, and quiet anger it would take. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't over. I took Buddy to the vet first thing that Monday morning. I told Tyler I needed to run some errands, but the truth was, I couldn't shake the unease in my gut. Something in Buddy's eyes haunted me all night. The way he avoided looking at me head on, the way he tucked his tail, it wasn't the dog I knew. The drive was quiet. Usually Buddy pressed his nose against the cracked window, ears flapping in the breeze. This time he lay curled on the seat, eyes half closed, every bump in the road drawing a soft whimper. My chest ached with guilt. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on his back, as if my touch alone could promise safety. Dr. Klein had been our vet for nearly a decade. She knew Buddy as well as anyone. When I carried him inside, she gave me a puzzled look. "What's going on with our boy?" she asked gently. I described what I'd noticed, the limp, the cut on his ear, the stiffness. Her face grew serious. She moved her hands carefully over his body, murmuring little observations. Buddy winced when she touched his ribs. She frowned, then turned to me. "I'd like to do some x-rays, just to be sure." I waited in the small exam room, staring at the posters on the wall about heartworm prevention and senior dog care. My thoughts churned like a storm. Dogs don't lie. Bruises don't just appear out of nowhere. Dr. Klein returned with the images. She pointed to faint shadows across Buddy's ribcage. "These look like contusions," she explained, "consistent with blunt force trauma." She paused. "Did he take a fall? Get hit by something?" My throat tightened. The logical part of me screamed to keep calm, not to jump to conclusions. But another part, the one that had seen Buddy flinch from a raised hand, whispered the truth I didn't want to face. "I wasn't home," I said finally. "He was here with my daughter's fiance." Her expression softened, but her voice stayed professional. "I can document everything, if you need it." I nodded, my jaw locked so tightly it hurt. When I brought Buddy back home, Tyler was lounging on the couch, flipping through channels. He glanced up. "What did the vet say?" I looked at him for a long moment. His face gave nothing away. Too calm, too casual. "Probably just sore joints," I said, testing him. He smirked. "Told you, dogs get old, man." Buddy slunk behind me, keeping as much distance from him as possible. That was the moment my doubt vanished. No, this wasn't old age. This was fear. Emily came by later that evening after her shift at the hospital. I tried to keep my voice even as I told her about the limp, the cut, the x-rays. She bit her lip torn between defending Tyler and acknowledging the obvious. "Dad, are you sure Tyler said Buddy slipped on the hardwood when he was chasing a ball?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I crouched and coaxed Buddy into the living room. I raised my hand, not fast, not threatening, just enough to mimic the motion of tossing something. Buddy flinched hard, crouching low eyes wide. Emily gasped. "He's never done that before," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "He hasn't." She looked away, conflict etched across her face. I could see her struggling, torn between loyalty to her fiancé and the evidence in front of her. I didn't press. Not yet. That night, after she left, I sat at the kitchen table long after the house went quiet. Buddy lay beside me, breathing softly, his body twitching now and then, like he was caught in some nightmare. I stared at the x-ray printouts, the shadows where bruises lingered. A man is measured by how he treats those who can't fight back. Tyler had failed that test. But anger alone wouldn't fix this. Bursting into rage would only give him excuses, maybe even drive Emily closer to him out of defiance. No. If I wanted to protect Buddy and my daughter, I needed proof, undeniable proof. I walked through the house in the dim light, studying every corner as if the walls themselves might confess. In the garage, the scuff marks caught my eye again, lower down near where Buddy's bed used to be. I crouched, running my fingers over the rough streaks, imagining a struggle, a desperate attempt by a dog to escape a boot or a shove. In the trash, the broom handle still sat broken jagged at the end. I lifted it out, turning it in my hands. Splinters stuck to my palm. My stomach twisted. I wrapped it in an old plastic bag and tucked it into the shed. I didn't know if it would ever matter, but something told me to keep it. Evidence, even if crude. Back inside, I sat down again, staring at Buddy's sleeping form. His breathing was uneven, a soft whimper escaping every so often. I felt something inside me harden, a cold resolve, replacing the hot, useless anger. I whispered to him, though he couldn't hear me through his dreams. "I'll get him, boy, but we'll do it the right way." I didn't realize then how long the road ahead would be, or how many nights I'd spend watching, documenting, piecing together the truth. But one thing was certain: Tyler had crossed a line, and once a man crosses that line, there's no going back. After the vet visit, after Emily's shaken silence, and after another long night with Buddy curled against my leg, I made a decision. I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't accuse, I wouldn't give Tyler the satisfaction of knowing how much rage burned inside me. I would go quiet. Quiet isn't weakness, quiet is patience. Quiet is when a man starts planning. I knew what I'd seen in Buddy's eyes. Fear doesn't lie. And I knew what Dr. Klein's report said. But I also knew that people like Tyler, slick charming, always quick with a smirk, could spin stories, could twist facts. If I went at him with nothing but emotion, I'd look like an overprotective old man jealous of his daughter's fiance. That wasn't enough. I needed proof. The first step was simple watch. I asked a few neighbors if they'd noticed anything unusual. Most shook their heads politely, but one old Mrs. Green across the street furrowed her brow. "I did hear some loud thumping. Saturday night," she said. "Thought maybe you were fixing something in the garage." My stomach sank. I told her I hadn't been home. She pursed her lips but didn't say more. Still, it was a thread. Then I thought about the cameras. In our neighborhood, almost every house had a Ring doorbell or some kind of security system. People loved to share clip spares, wandering through the yard porch, pirates' kids sneaking out. I asked around casually if anyone had footage from the weekend. A few folks offered to check. 2 days later, I had my first piece of something concrete. One neighbor, James, pulled me into his garage and queued up his camera feed. The angle was wide, catching part of my driveway from across the street. The clip showed Tyler yanking Buddy roughly on the leash hard enough to make the dog stumble. Tyler looked around afterward like he was checking if anyone had seen. Then he jerked the leash again. It wasn't the full story, but it was something. I think James copied the clip onto a USB and drove home with my heart pounding. I played it over and over that night, the way Tyler's arm snapped back, the way Buddy's legs splayed out awkwardly, the way Tyler smirked afterward as if pleased with himself. I sat in the dark kitchen screen, glowing fists tight. Each replay added weight to the anger pressing on my chest, but I didn't lash out. Not yet. Instead, I started preparing. I went online and ordered a discreet camera disguised as a wall clock, another as a digital picture frame. They'd blend right into the living room and garage. I installed them carefully one afternoon while Tyler was out. Each had motion detection, each backed up to the cloud. I also upgraded my old security system, nothing flashy, just enough to cover blind spots in the house. I spent hours reading manuals, testing angles, making sure no detail would slip through. By the end of the week, I had eyes everywhere. Meanwhile, I kept notes, dates, times, every odd sound, every mark on Buddy's body every time he flinched at Tyler's presence. I wrote them in a small notebook I carried in my jacket. It felt almost obsessive, but I knew I'd need it. Paper doesn't lie when memories get fuzzy. The breakthrough came sooner than I expected. One evening, while Emily worked a night shift, I sat in my truck down the block watching the live feed from the picture frame camera. Tyler walked into the living room, muttering something under his breath. Buddy, lying on his bed, lifted his head. Tyler kicked at the dog bed, not hard enough to send Buddy flying, but enough to make him scramble out of the way. Then he crouched, pointing a finger in Buddy's face. His lips moved, but the mic caught enough stupid dog. "Learn your place." My blood boiled. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I wanted to storm in, drag him out by the collar, and end it then and there. But I forced myself to breathe, to remember the plan. Proof. I needed more. I saved the clip, uploaded it to a secure drive, and duplicated it on 2 separate USBs. I even made a hidden email account under a fake name and stored copies there just in case anything happened to my computer. The next day, I stopped by the Fort Collins Police Department not to file a report yet, but to ask questions. They directed me to Animal Control, where I met Officer Ramirez. She was direct, calm, and professional. When I described what I suspected, she didn't roll her eyes or dismiss me. Instead, she said, "Keep documenting. The more evidence, the better. Video, vet records, photos, timestamps. When you're ready, bring it in. We'll take it seriously." Her words settled in my chest like a stone. This wasn't just my imagination. This wasn't paranoia. There was a process, a path, and I was already walking it. That night, I sat with Buddy on the porch. The sun was going down, painting the sky pink and gold over the Rockies. Buddy rested his head on my knee, sighing deeply, finally at peace for a moment. I scratched behind his ear, whispering, "We're gonna get him, boy, but we'll do it right." Inside, Tyler laughed at something on his phone, oblivious. Quiet isn't weakness. Quiet is preparation, and I was ready to stay quiet as long as it took. I didn't know when I didn't know how, but I knew one day soon Tyler would face what he'd done. And when that day came, there'd be no way out for him. The night after I spoke with Officer Ramirez, I sat at the kitchen table with Buddy at my feet. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft rhythm of Buddy's breathing. I stared at my notebook, the growing list of dates, times, and observations. Every page felt like fuel stacked carefully into a pile. What I needed now was the match. I knew Tyler thought he was clever. He strutted around my house like he owned it, tapping on his phone, leaving half-empty bottles on the counter, tossing his sneakers into corners without a thought. He probably believed I was too old, too slow, too naive to catch him. That arrogance was his weakness. So I played along. When he asked if I could head out again the next weekend, said he wanted to help out around the house while Emily worked, I pretended to hesitate. I scratched my chin, muttered something about needing to visit Mike again in Cheyenne. He shrugged, trying to look casual, but I saw the flicker of relief in his eyes, relief that he'd get the house and Buddy to himself again. Sure, I said, maybe I'll head up Friday night. Inside, I was already planning. That week, I doubled down on preparations. I upgraded the cloud storage for the cameras, making sure every clip uploaded instantly to a server Tyler couldn't touch. I bought an extra USB drive and tucked it into the hollow base of an old lamp in my bedroom. I even went so far as to back up files onto a hidden folder in my email under a fake name. It felt paranoid, but paranoia is just preparation when you've got something worth protecting. I also made sure Buddy was as comfortable as possible. Dr. Klein had prescribed a pain patch to help with the soreness along his ribs, and I documented everything, photos of the patch receipts from the pharmacy, even the timestamps from when I applied it. Evidence matters. Every detail could be the difference between truth and doubt. Emily noticed my behavior shifting. One evening, as she sat across from me at the table, she said quietly, "Dad, you're different. What's going on?" I wanted to tell her everything right then, but I knew she wasn't ready. She still carried that thread of loyalty to Tyler, a fragile hope that maybe all this was just a misunderstanding. If I showed her too soon, she might recoil, defend him, cling to denial. I couldn't risk it. So I just said, "I'm making sure Buddy's taken care of, that's all." She studied me for a long time, then nodded. I could see the worry in her eyes, though the kind of worry a daughter gets when she knows her father is fighting battles she can't see. By Thursday, my plan was set. I told Tyler I'd be gone Friday night through Sunday morning. He smirked, said, "No problem, I got this." He didn't notice the small camera I'd moved into the garage, angled perfectly toward Buddy's bed. That Friday, I drove around the block, parked 2 streets over, and sat in my truck with the live feed streaming to my phone. Buddy lay curled in his bed, dozing, while Tyler paced the living room, beer in hand. For an hour, nothing happened. My nerves buzzed. Part of me hoped desperately that maybe I was wrong, that maybe Tyler would prove me paranoid. But men like him don't change when they think no one's watching. Sometime after 9 p.m., Tyler stormed into the garage. The camera caught him muttering under his breath, his gestures sharp and angry. Buddy lifted his head, ears back. Then Tyler kicked at the side of the bed. Buddy scrambled, nearly slipping on the concrete. Tyler pointed a finger, leaned down, lips twisted. "Stupid dog, learn your place." The audio caught it clearly this time. I sat in my truck, heart pounding. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. My chest burned with rage. Every instinct screamed at me to burst through the garage door, to pull Tyler off his feet and make him feel what Buddy had felt. But I forced myself to breathe. Proof mattered more than impulse. I saved the clip, downloaded it to the USB, emailed it to the backup account. Then I called Emily. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice low, steady. "I need you to come home tomorrow. Bring your overnight bag. We need to talk." She hesitated. "Dad, is everything okay?" I looked at the screen again, at Buddy pressed against the far wall, tail tucked, Tyler looming over him. "No," I said softly, "it's not." After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of the truck for a long time. My body felt heavy, but my mind was sharp, clearer than it had been in weeks. The fuse was lit now. All I had to do was guide it to the explosion. The rest of the night, I stayed parked, eyes fixed on the feed. Tyler left the garage after a while, tossing the empty beer bottle into the recycling bin. Buddy curled back into his bed, trembling. I whispered through the glass of the truck, though he couldn't hear me. "Hang in there, boy. Just a little longer." By dawn, I drove back, entered the house as if nothing had happened. Tyler was asleep on the couch, snoring. Buddy lifted his head weakly when I walked in, then wagged his tail, once faint but determined. That small flicker of trust gave me the strength to keep going. I poured coffee, pretending it was an ordinary morning. Tyler stirred, rubbed his eyes, and mumbled something about needing more sleep. I nodded, played the role of the clueless father, but inside, every fiber of me was bracing for what came next. Because soon Tyler would learn that a man who hurts what I love doesn't just face my anger, he faces my proof. And proof has a way of burning hotter than any rage. By the time the next weekend rolled around, I was ready to take the risk. Every clip I'd saved so far painted a picture, but I wanted the whole canvas filled in. No shadows left where Tyler could wriggle free. If he was going to face consequences, it had to be undeniable. So I set a trap. Friday morning, I told Tyler I had errands in Denver that might keep me overnight. He grinned a little too quickly, hiding it behind a sip of his coffee. "Sure thing, Frank. No problem." His confidence told me everything he believed he had me fooled. But I wasn't going anywhere. That afternoon, I tucked Buddy gently into his bed in the garage, layering a new blanket so the camera had a perfect view. Before I left, I applied the pain patch Dr. Klein had prescribed for him. I documented it carefully, a time-stamped photo on my phone, the prescription bottle in the frame, even a note in my journal if anyone ever claimed Buddy was already injured before the records would prove otherwise. When Tyler settled in for the evening, I parked my truck a block away, angled just enough that I could see the glow of my house through the trees. The live feeds played on my phone, the living room camera, the garage camera, the disguised clock on the wall. My heart hammered as I sat in that cab, waiting every muscle tight. For a while, nothing happened. Tyler microwaved a frozen pizza, scrolled through his phone, and watched TV. Buddy lay still, head resting on his paws. I started to think maybe Tyler would keep his temper in check this time. Maybe the act of being watched, even unknowingly, was enough to change him. But cruelty has a way of boiling over when it thinks no one sees. Around 9, Tyler stomped into the garage, muttering curses under his breath. He tossed an empty beer can toward the trash, missing by a wide margin. Buddy shifted nervously, ears back, body low. Then it happened. Tyler grabbed the leash hanging by the door, snapped it onto Buddy's collar, and yanked him upright. Buddy stumbled, whined, tried to resist. Tyler pulled harder, dragging him across the concrete floor. The sound scraped through the microphone claws, skittering the leash, tightening. "Come on, you dumb mutt," Tyler spat. I clenched my teeth, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles burned. Every fiber of me wanted to throw the door open, sprint across the yard, and put an end to it. But I forced myself to sit still. Proof mattered more than my rage. On the screen, Tyler shoved Buddy toward the far wall. The dog slid tail-tucked ribs, brushing against the very spot where I'd seen those scuff marks. Then Tyler raised his hand and threw a shoe across the garage. It hit the wall inches from Buddy, who flinched and whimpered. The audio captured Tyler's voice, sharp and full of contempt. "You listen when I tell you." I couldn't take it anymore. My vision blurred with fury. I hit record on the external app, saving the live feed directly to my backup drive. My hands shook so badly I could barely press the buttons, but I did. This was the match to the pile of fuel I'd been stacking. I called Emily. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice low, steady, despite the storm inside me. "Come home now. Bring your overnight bag." There was a pause. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Just come, please." She must have heard something in my tone because she didn't argue. She said she'd be there by morning. When I hung up, I sat back in the truck and closed my eyes. My heart raced, adrenaline flooding every nerve. I whispered to myself like a prayer. "Hold on, buddy. Just a little longer." The rest of the night dragged on in a haze of tension. Tyler eventually stormed back inside, leaving Buddy curled against the wall, trembling. I watched him lick at his paw, restless eyes darting toward the door, as if afraid Tyler might return. I wanted nothing more than to walk and scoop him up and tell him it was over. But timing mattered. Tomorrow, Emily would see with her own eyes. Tomorrow, there'd be no room for doubt. By dawn, the sky painted itself in pale blue and gold. I slipped quietly into the house, making it look as though I had just returned from Denver. Tyler was passed out on the couch, an empty beer can balanced on the armrest. Buddy limped over to me, pressing his body against my leg as if to say, "You came back." I bent down, stroked his fur, and whispered, "I promise. It ends soon." When Emily arrived later that morning, I met her at the door. She carried an overnight bag, her face tense. "Dad, what's going on?" "Come inside," I said softly. I led her to the living room, where my laptop sat open on the table. I pulled up the clips one after another, the leash yanked tight, the shoe flung against the wall, Buddy's whimper echoing through the garage. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. She gasped, tears welling in her eyes. No, he wouldn't. Her voice broke, but the images kept playing, undeniable. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't gloat. I just sat beside her, my hand on hers, steadying her as the truth carved its way into her heart. She sobbed quietly, shoulders trembling. "Dad, what do we do?" I looked at Buddy, curled on his bed, watching us with those tired, trusting eyes. Then I looked back at my daughter. "We protect him," I said, "and we make sure Tyler answers for this." That night, Emily stayed in her old room. I made sure the locks were changed, the spare keys collected, the house sealed tight. Buddy slept close, finally resting without trembling. As I lay awake in the dark, I thought about the days ahead. The evidence was ready. The truth was clear. The test was complete. And now Tyler would face the reckoning he'd brought upon himself. When Emily saw the footage, the room went still. The only sounds were Buddy's soft breathing and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Her hand stayed pressed against her mouth as tears slid silently down her cheeks. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just let the truth sit there between us. She kept shaking her head, whispering, "No, no," as though denial might undo what she'd just witnessed. But denial can't erase a video. Denial can't silence a whimper caught on audio or erase the way her fiance's face twisted with cruelty. I reached over, set my hand on hers. Her fingers were cold, trembling. She gripped me back like she was drowning. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "I didn't want this to be true. But you needed to see it yourself." She sobbed quietly, her shoulders jerking. "I loved him, Dad. I thought he was good." My chest ached, not just for Buddy, but for my daughter. Betrayal doesn't only break trust in another person, it breaks trust in yourself. It makes you question your own judgment, your own worth. I knew that pain too well, and now she was living it. I pulled her close. She buried her face in my shoulder, tears soaking my shirt. Buddy lifted his head, ears twitching at her cries. Slowly, he dragged himself across the floor until he was pressed against her leg. Emily looked down through blurry eyes and let out another sob. She stroked his fur, whispering, "I'm so sorry, Buddy. I'm so sorry." That night, the three of us sat together in silence. No TV, no distractions, just grief and the faint comfort of being together. But silence doesn't protect you forever. It only gives you space to prepare. The next morning, I brewed coffee and set my notebook on the table. Emily came in, eyes swollen from crying, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked younger than her 27 years, fragile, in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. "What do we do now?" she asked quietly. I slid the notebook toward her. "We make a plan. We do this carefully. Tyler can't know we're onto him yet." She nodded, though her lips pressed into a thin line like she was bracing herself. I explained the steps. First, secure Buddy. We couldn't risk Tyler being near him again, not even for a moment. I called Mrs. Green, our neighbor, and asked if Buddy could stay with her for a few days. She loved dogs and didn't hesitate. "Bring him over whenever you're ready," she said. Second, the house. I changed the locks that afternoon, installing new deadbolts, reprogramming the smart lock on the back door. Emily helped, her hand steady now, determination replacing grief. Together, we gathered the spare keys. Tyler might have had every copy from drawers, every forgotten one in the garage. When we were done, the house felt sealed safe. Third, the legal steps. I pulled out the vet's report, the receipts, the USBs with copies of footage. I showed Emily the folder where I kept everything neatly labeled and dated. She looked at me with a kind of stunned admiration. "You've been building this case." "I had to," I said simply. "Emotion isn't enough. He needed to be exposed with proof." That afternoon, Emily sent Tyler a short message. "Meet me at the house tomorrow at noon. We need to talk." No explanation, no anger, just simple words. When she showed me the text, my stomach twisted. The thought of him stepping back into my house, sitting across from us, like nothing had happened, it made my blood boil. But I knew it had to be done. Tyler needed to see what we had. He needed to face it. That evening, Emily and I sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the Rockies. The air was cool, crisp. Buddy rested at Mrs. Green's house across the street, safe for the night. The absence of his weight at my feet felt strange, but knowing he was protected gave me a sliver of peace. Emily stared at the horizon. "Dad," she said softly, "what if he denies it? What if he says the videos are fake or that Buddy hurt himself?" I took a deep breath. That's why we have everything documented. The vet report, the timestamps, the neighbor's statements. He can try to deny it, but the truth will stand. She nodded slowly. I feel so stupid. How did I not see it? I shook my head. You wanted to see the good in him. That's not stupidity. That's kindness. Don't ever punish yourself for that. She leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder. For a moment, we sat in silence, father and daughter, both scarred by betrayal, but united in resolve. Later that night, as I lay awake, I thought about what was coming. The noon meeting, as I'd already labeled it in my mind, felt like the pivot point, the moment where silence would end and confrontation would begin. I imagined Tyler's face when he saw the footage. The smirk wiped clean, replaced by something else, fear maybe, or the desperate scramble of a man caught in his own lies. But more than that, I imagined Emily's face, stronger, steadier, no longer doubting herself. When I finally drifted off to sleep, I dreamed of Buddy running free along the river trail again. No limp, no fear, just the wind in his ears and the sun on his back. The next morning, I woke with a clear mind. The plan was in motion. The house was ready. The evidence was airtight. Tyler thought he'd been clever, but soon he'd learn that cruelty leaves a trail you can't sweep away. And tomorrow at noon, he would face that trail, laid out in front of him, piece by damning piece. The morning of the meeting arrived with a heaviness in the air. The sun was out, but the house felt dim, as if the walls themselves knew what was coming. I brewed coffee like I always did, but even the smell seemed muted. Buddy stayed safe across the street with Mrs. Green, so the silence inside my home was deeper than usual. It wasn't the peaceful kind of silence, it was the kind before a storm. Emily sat at the kitchen table, staring at her mug without drinking. She hadn't said much all morning, just fiddled with the edge of her sleeve. I could see the weight pressing on her. It wasn't just about Tyler's betrayal of Buddy. It was about her betrayal too. The realization that the man she thought she knew had fooled her. At 11:30, I laid out everything on the kitchen table like pieces on a chessboard. Printouts of the vet report, still frames from the video footage, the USB drive, even the broken broom handle wrapped carefully in a bag. Each piece was a truth Tyler couldn't explain away. Each one was a nail in the coffin of his lies. I didn't pace, though every part of me wanted to. Instead, I sat across from Emily and reminded myself calm. This wasn't about shouting him down. This was about control. At exactly noon, the doorbell rang. My pulse quickened. Emily's hand shook slightly as she reached for the knob. She opened the door, and Tyler walked in wearing that same practiced smirk he always wore, as if he had the upper hand. He carried himself like someone who believed charm could erase anything. He glanced at the table, then at me. "What's all this?" he asked casual, like he'd walked into a routine family talk. I gestured to the chair across from us. "Sit." He did, leaning back like he owned the room. "So what's this about Emily? You've been acting weird. Your dad filling your head with stuff again." I said nothing at first. I reached over, clicked the laptop awake, and let the first video play. The sound of Buddy's whimper filled the room. On the screen, Tyler's own arm yanked the leash. His own voice sneered the word "stupid dog." The smirk faltered. He sat forward, blinking. That's taken out of context. He was acting up. Dogs need discipline sometimes. I clicked to the next clip, the shoe thrown against the garage wall, but Buddy pressed against the corner. Emily flinched, tears in her eyes, but she stayed strong, staring straight at him. "That's fake," Tyler said quickly, his voice sharper now. "You edited that. I slid the vet report across the table. Contusions, documented, time-stamped from the same weekend you were here." His eyes darted over the paper, then back at me. His mask was cracking. He tried to laugh, but the sound was hollow. "You're really going this far over a dog." I leaned forward, my voice low steady. "Not just a dog, my family. And I told you proof matters." Emily's voice broke the silence, quiet but firm. "Tyler, it's over. You need to leave." For the first time, he looked rattled. His mouth opened, then closed. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane. You can't prove anything in court. No one's going to believe some old man with cameras hidden around his house." I slid a final envelope toward him. Inside were the neighbors' statements, copies of the USB, and Officer Ramirez's business card. They'll believe this. And, if you push me, every piece of this goes to the police today. His face twisted, anger flashing through the cracks of his confidence. You'll regret this, he spat, jabbing a finger toward me. Both of you. Emily's shoulders stiffened, but she didn't flinch. For the first time, I saw her look at him without love or doubt, just clear, cold recognition. Tyler stormed out the door, slamming behind him so hard the walls shook. The house fell silent again, heavier than before. Emily collapsed into the chair, covering her face with her hands. She shook, but not from grief this time. From the release of tension, the breaking of a chain. It's really over, she whispered. I put a hand on her shoulder. Yes, but it's not finished. Because in my gut, I knew Tyler wouldn't let it end here. Men like him don't go quietly. They thrash, they claw, they try to drag others down with them. And I was right. Barely 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find Tyler standing there, his mother beside him. She looked furious, her eyes sharp, her voice already raised. How dare you accuse my son of something like this? Do you know what defamation is? We'll sue you for everything you have. Emily froze behind me, shock flashing across her face. I stayed calm. I didn't yell, didn't argue. I simply held the folder of evidence in my hand, heavy with truth. You're welcome to try, I said evenly. But I've already spoken with animal control. I've already secured every copy. Go ahead. File your lawsuit. The discovery process will be very interesting. For a second, even his mother's fire dimmed. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado gone. I closed the door quietly, not slamming it, not feeding their drama, just a click of finality. Inside, Emily exhaled shakily. What now, she asked. I looked at the pile of evidence on the table, the neat arrangement of truth. Now, I said, we make it official. The morning after Tyler stormed out with his mother, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was still Emily asleep in her old room, Buddy safe at Mrs. Green's across the street. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the stack of evidence laid out in front of me. For weeks, it had been building notes in my journal photos, videos, the vet's report. Now it was time to carry it beyond the walls of my home. At 9 sharp, I drove downtown to the Fort Collins police station. The air felt sharp and cool, the kind of morning that clears your head whether you want it to or not. I parked, tucked the folder under my arm, and walked inside. Officer Ramirez met me in a small interview room. She remembered me from before, her steady eyes giving me a sense of calm I hadn't felt in days. I spread the folder across the table, each piece arranged in careful order. She didn't interrupt, didn't question until I finished. Then she leaned back, arms crossed. This is solid, she said. Video medical documentation corroboration from neighbors. You've done the legwork. She paused. I'll file the report today. From here, the district attorney will review. Charges will likely follow. Her words landed heavy but steady. This wasn't just my private fight anymore. It was public now. Official. When I left the station, I felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter because I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Heavier because now it was real. Back home, Emily sat at the table, waiting, hands clenched together. She jumped when I set the empty folder down. Well, it's filed, I said simply. Her eyes widened. Relief and fear tangled in her expression. So that's it. They'll would arrest him. In time, I said. The process takes a while, but it's out of our hands now. She exhaled shakily, and for the first time in days, I saw her shoulders drop just a little. But there was more to do. That afternoon, I called the HOA office. One of the board members, who also happened to live down the block, had already heard whispers. I asked formally for the camera clip that showed Tyler yanking Buddy on the leash. The woman on the phone didn't hesitate. She said she'd email it with the proper timestamp. Then I visited the neighbors who had heard the yelps that weekend. 2 agreed to write short statements describing what they'd heard. 1 even mentioned seeing Tyler's car parked crooked in my driveway late at night. Each detail added another stitch to the fabric of truth. Meanwhile, Emily began the painful task of untangling her life from Tyler's. She called the wedding venue, her voice shaking as she explained the situation. The coordinator was sympathetic and refunded part of the deposit. The florist canceled without penalty. Once Emily mentioned the police report. Piece by piece, she dismantled the future she thought she had with him. It wasn't easy to watch, but I saw strength in her I hadn't seen before. That evening, I opened an old photo album. Inside was a picture of Emily at 7 years old, sitting on the back porch with Buddy as a clumsy puppy in her lap. She wore overalls, her smile wide and toothy, Buddy's ears drooped comically, his eyes bright. I pulled the photo out, slipped it into the evidence folder, not because it proved anything legal, but because it reminded me why this fight mattered. By the end of the week, the case was moving. Officer Ramirez called to confirm that charges were being considered misdemeanor, animal cruelty, possibly elevated given the documented injuries. She asked if Emily and I would come in to give statements. We agreed without hesitation. The day we gave our statements, I sat across from the investigator and told the story from the beginning, leaving Buddy for the weekend. The limp when I returned, the bruises, the cut, the broom handle in the trash. My voice shook at times, but I kept going. Emily sat beside me, her voice breaking when she described watching the videos, hearing Buddy's whimper. When we finished, the investigator nodded. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. Back home, the shift was palpable. Tyler stopped showing up at the house. His calls to Emily turned frantic, then angry, then silent. Word started to spread among their circle of friends. Emily didn't hide the truth anymore. When people asked, she told them plainly, "He hurt Buddy." It's over. Some didn't believe it first. Some tried to downplay it. But once the police report existed, once the paperwork was real, opinions changed. The truth, once buried, had a way of spreading. Tyler's carefully crafted image began to crack. He'd bragged about his entrepreneurship, about his connections, about deals, always just around the corner. But now whispers followed him instead about court dates, about cruelty, about the kind of man who couldn't be trusted around a dog, let alone a family. For me, justice wasn't about humiliation. It was about restoration, about making sure Buddy was safe, Emily was free, and the truth was undeniable. At night, Buddy came home from Mrs. Green's limping less with each passing day. He curled up beside my chair, sighing deeply, as if finally able to rest. Emily joined us, sometimes quiet, sometimes tearful, but always stronger than the day before. I still carried anger inside me, but it wasn't the wildfire it once was. It was something steadier now, something colder, sharper. Not rage for the sake of rage, but justice waiting to be completed. One evening, as the sun set behind the Rockies painting the sky, orange and purple, Emily asked me, "Dad, do you think he'll ever really pay for what he did?" I looked at Buddy resting peacefully at our feet. Then I looked at my daughter, her eyes steady on mine. "Yes," I said, "because the truth always leaves a mark, and he'll carry it with him whether he wants to or not." And with that, I knew we were ready for the next step. The weeks that followed felt like a long fuse burning quietly. Each day carried its own weight: paperwork, filed statements, given calls from the investigator, updates from Officer Ramirez. It was a slow march toward something I knew was inevitable. Tyler had always thought he was untouchable. He strutted through life with a grin that suggested the rules didn't apply to him. But rules catch up with everyone sooner or later, and this time the evidence wasn't hearsay or suspicion. It was video medical documentation, neighbors' accounts, timestamps, receipts. Proof sharp enough to cut through every excuse he might try to weave. The first hit came from the legal side. The district attorney filed misdemeanor animal cruelty charges. Tyler received notice to appear in court. When Emily showed me the letter her lawyer forwarded, I felt an odd kind of calm. Not triumph calm, because at last the system was moving. The same system I had built my case for, piece by piece, night after night, while Buddy whimpered in his sleep. The second hit came from the civil side. With the vet bills stacking up over $600 already, with more to come, I filed a claim in small claims court. Not for the money. I could afford the bills, but because the record needed to show what he had cost us both in dollars and in pain. In my petition, I listed the medical invoices, the replacement costs for Buddy's damaged bed, even the broken broom handle as destroyed property. I requested community service at the local animal shelter as part of the restitution, not out of spite, but because facing animals every day might force him to see what he'd done. The third hit wasn't one I delivered myself. It came from the community. Word spread faster than wildfire once the police report became public. Tyler's friends, the ones he bragged to about investments and business deals, started pulling away. Clients canceled. A landlord's screening service flagged his pending charge, and suddenly his new lease application evaporated. He had built his identity on smooth surfaces, but cruelty leaves cracks. And, once cracks, show the whole facade collapses. Emily, meanwhile, reclaimed her life piece by piece. She called the caterer, the photographer, the band. Each cancellation was painful, like tearing away something she had once dreamed of. but each step also freed her. By the end of the month, she no longer spoke of Tyler with tears, just with a quiet firmness like he was a shadow that had finally lifted. For Buddy, healing was slower but steady. Hydrotherapy at the vet's office, long, gentle walks by the river, a new orthopedic bed in the corner of my room. Each night, he climbed onto it with less hesitation, sighing deeply, as though the ghosts of the past were loosening their grip. Sometimes he still flinched at sudden noises, but his tail wagged more often now, his eyes softer when he looked at me. I still kept every scrap of evidence close, not because I doubted the outcome, but because I knew men like Tyler. They scramble when cornered, lash out when exposed. I wasn't going to give him a single crack to slip through. The day of the first hearing, I walked into the courthouse with Emily at my side. My folder felt heavy in my hands, not just with paper, but with the weight of weeks of silence, nights of restraint, hours of planning. Tyler sat across the room, his jaw tight, his lawyer flipping through papers with an air of practiced indifference. He glanced at me once, and for the first time, I didn't see arrogance in his eyes. I saw something else, fear. The prosecutor laid out the case, the vet's affidavit, the videos, the audio, the neighbor statements. Tyler's lawyer tried to spin stories. Buddy was clumsy. The videos were misinterpreted. I was an overbearing father, but the evidence cut through each excuse like a blade. No matter how he twisted, the truth stood solid, undeniable. When we left the courthouse that day, Emily walked beside me in silence. Then, as we reached the steps, she said softly, "Dad, you did it. You really did it." I shook my head. We did it. Buddy did it. The truth did it. But inside, I felt the fire of revenge finally flaring, not the wildfire of fists or rage, but the steady fire of justice, explosive in its impact, but lawful in its form, the kind of revenge that lasts, not because it shouts, but because it leaves scars on the record scars you can't scrub away. That night, I sat on the porch with Buddy at my feet. The crickets sang in the grass, the stars blinked above the Rockies, and the air carried the scent of pine. Emily came out with 2 mugs of tea, setting one beside me. "Do you ever regret not just going after him directly?" she asked quietly. I thought about it. About the nights I sat in my truck, fists clenched, watching Tyler on the screen. About the temptation to end it all with one burst of rage. "No," I said finally, "because this way it sticks. This way he carries it with him. You punch a man, the bruise fades. But a record that follows you." Emily nodded slowly, sipping her tea. Buddy stretched out his head, resting on her feet, his eyes closed in contentment. I looked at them, my daughter stronger than I'd ever seen her, my dog healing my home safe again. And I realized something. Revenge wasn't about destroying Tyler. It was about restoring what he had tried to take from us. Peace, safety, dignity. And in that moment, sitting under the Colorado night sky, I felt the closest thing to peace I'd known in a long time. The morning of the final court date dawned gray and cool, the kind of sky that feels heavy with meaning. I dressed slowly, pulling on my best jacket, the same one I'd worn to Emily's nursing school graduation. Buddy watched me from his bed, head tilted tail, thumping weakly against the cushion. His eyes held a calm I hadn't seen in months, as if he somehow knew this was the last step. Emily met me in the kitchen, her face pale but determined. She wore a simple black dress, hair pulled back neatly. She looked older somehow, not in years, but in spirit, as though this ordeal had carved away the last traces of youthful naivety. We drove in silence. Buddy left safe with Mrs. Green, both of us bracing for whatever came next. The courthouse was quiet when we arrived. Tyler was already there with his lawyer, his jaw set tight, his posture stiff. He looked thinner than I remembered, the bravado stripped from him. For the first time, he seemed ordinary. Just another man facing consequences he never thought would come. The judge listened patiently as the prosecutor laid out the case. The videos were played again, Buddy's whimpers echoing in the courtroom. The vet's affidavit was read aloud, the words clinical but damning contusions consistent with blunt force trauma. The neighbor statements followed, voices of people who had nothing to gain by speaking except the truth. Tyler's lawyer tried once more to spin the story. He said the dog had health issues, that I had manipulated the evidence, that I was an overbearing father trying to sabotage his client's future. But the words fell flat. The evidence was too strong, too consistent. Finally, the judge spoke. His voice was calm, measured but firm. Tyler was found guilty of misdemeanor animal cruelty. The sentence, 12 months of probation, 200 hours of mandatory community service at the local animal shelter restitution for Buddy's medical bills and mandatory counseling. Most importantly, a protective order was issued. Tyler was barred from any contact with Buddy or with Emily. As the gavel came down, a strange stillness settled over me. Not triumph, not even satisfaction, just stillness. The kind that comes when a storm has finally passed, leaving behind a quiet you don't quite trust at first. Outside, Emily clung to me. "It's over," she whispered. "Yes," I said softly, "it is. But the truth is, endings aren't neat." Tyler walked away with his record, yes, but the damage he'd done lingered in small ways. Buddy still startled at loud noises. Emily still carried scars of betrayal, and I still carried the weight of knowing I hadn't been there the moment Buddy needed me most. Healing isn't instant. It comes in fragments. Over the weeks that followed, Buddy grew stronger. The hydrotherapy sessions worked wonders, easing the limp. His fur filled in around the scar on his ear. Slowly he began to wag his tail more freely, his eyes brightening when I reached for his leash. Emily, too, began to heal. She threw herself into her work at the hospital, her patients becoming both her refuge and her proof of strength. She told me once, sitting on the porch with tea in her hands, that she no longer blamed herself. "He fooled me," she said, "but he doesn't get to define me." Hearing her say that was like watching a flower bloom after a harsh winter. One afternoon, she surprised me by bringing home a flyer from the local shelter. "They have a dog that needs fostering," she said carefully, almost nervously. I looked at Buddy, who was stretched out at our feet, and then back at her. "Only if Buddy approves," I said. When we brought the little rescue pup home a week later, Buddy sniffed her cautiously, then gave a single wag of his tail. Emily laughed, the sound bright and free, and in that moment, I felt something inside me ease. Life was moving forward. As for me, I found my peace in the small things again. Morning walks by the river with Buddy at my side. Evenings on the porch watching the sun dip behind the Rockies. Quiet meals shared with Emily, laughter slowly returning to our conversations. One night, I sat outside alone, Buddy resting his head on my knee. The stars stretched across the sky, vast and eternal. I thought about everything we had endured, the betrayal, the silence, the planning, the confrontation, the courtroom. It had all led to this quiet moment. Revenge had been part of it, yes. But in the end, it wasn't about destroying Tyler. It was about protecting what I loved. It was about making sure cruelty didn't win. It was about giving Buddy and Emily the peace they deserved. I stroked Buddy's fur, whispering softly, "We made it, boy. We made it." His tail thumped once slow and steady like he understood. And, for the first time in a long time, I let myself smile, not the tight, bitter smile of anger restrained, but the gentle smile of a man who had carried his family through the fire and come out the other side. A gentle ending at last.